welcome back to Unmodern Romance. Today I am going to be talking about my own personal communication routine. This is one of the things that I find is very, very helpful to me and those around me, is that I think that the number one thing that is a problem in relationship is communication, and problems that stem from lack of communication, typically like expectation control, where people feel like, they have an expectation of one thing happening and then something else happens, and typically it's because the other person in the relationship feels like they thought something else was going to be happening, and then when they both did what they thought the other one wanted, it didn't end up being what either one expected, and then you start pointing fingers and it's the other person's fault, and you start assuming that there is malicious intent from your partner, which is never good. So please like and subscribe. Also try and find us on our other social media, which is down below, because there's a lot of things on some of the major sites that we're not allowed to talk about anymore. So there's going to be a lot more content on those services and so forth. So today I'm going to be talking about my communication routine. So the number one thing that I 100% do is sit down to dinner with my family. And beyond just asking what someone's date was like, one of the best quotes I ever heard from a friend of mine was that true love was asking someone how their day was and actually caring what they had to say in return, and actually wanting it to be an honest reflection. Because typically when you ask someone how their day's going or how are you doing, we expect them to say something, it's going great, or it's fine, or we don't want to hear, the wife's leaving me, my dog's sick, the car's about to be repossessed, and there's this pain in my knee. Nobody wants to hear all those things. Nobody wants to hear what's going wrong, because then somehow they're responsible. It's just kind of like this social thing that, we want the virtue of having asked someone how they're doing, but we don't actually want to hear back any of the bad things. Because most people probably have some bad things going, but at the same time, I think as a form of strength, we don't actually want to present that we're doing poorly to the world. So, we say, oh yeah, I'm doing fine, I'm doing great, I'm doing, marvelous things. Or, you typically within the form of your life, you've got enough things, going that you can be like, one of the 10 aspects that's happening in my life is going well. That's the thing that people want to talk about, because if you tell people that things aren't going well and you think that your wife's going to leave you, what ends up happening is you presenting something to the world of weakness. And it's like, well, if he can't even get his own wife in line, why am I going to promote him to be in charge of this section of my business or whatever? So people don't typically want to talk about that. But if you want a real relationship with real love, one of the things that you have to do is really care that you're psychologically not doing well. Well, what can I do selflessly to help you? What are the things that I need to change in my life to better accommodate this other person that are going to completely unaccommodate me, and how do we compromise those changes to meet in the middle? Because, maybe what they are expecting from me, if I ask them, hey, how are you doing? And they're like, I'm, miserable. And I'm like, how can I help? And they're like, well, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And you're like, I can do X and Y, but if I give you Z, I'm going to be miserable. Typically speaking, if they're asking for really drastic and dramatic changes, that comes from them not knowing themselves when you were first in the dating process. And two, it comes from them not being honest with what their real expectations were in the beginning. And I think, so often when people have a lot of feelings and they're feeling loved and they're feeling good, and they're having all the endorphins in their brain, they start to project who the other person is, and they just kind of assume that the other person is going to agree with them on everything. There's, I bet they love my favorite movie, and that really weird esoteric music I listen to, I bet that's their favorite too, and I can play that all the time, and they're never going to get mad at me for it. I can just play that. Yeah, probably, that we can wake up to that. In fact, yeah, that's what we're going to do every day. They're gonna love it. No, like no one wants that. Like there's no one out there who is just going to be your fantasy person 100% and not have their own problems and flaws. So you need to be able to stand up for yourself and be able to communicate and have that give and take. So just sitting down at dinner and being able to ask my partner and the kids, hey, how was your day today? And they can be as honest as they can be. A lot of times when you get that answer, oh, it's fine. No, you need to open up a little bit more because I'm not saying your day's not going well, but you need to be able to tell me, what did you do today? What were your expectations? What didn't go well today? Those kinds of conversations. But the bigger things that I have done are typically before bed is when me and my spouse really go over, what were you expecting to get done? We actually have a format of what were you expecting to get done, what did you get done, what didn't get done, and how can it be better. And hold on one second, I will bring this out to you in a second here. So, one of the things that we do is we have weekly meetings as well, and I feel like for me personally, the weekly meetings that I have are the most important thing of my week. I have them every day at Sunday, typically after church, and we sit down and we go over the previous week, what our goals for the last week were, what didn't happen, what went good, what went bad, why did they go good and bad. Sometimes you're like, hey, I want to do, in this case for me, hey, I want to do 10 videos this week. And you get into the week and it's there's no time because there's outside things that are hey, pay attention to me and deal with me right now. You can have an issue where I'm trying to think, I had a week that was just off last week, and, as an example, I had my ex-wife, who I'm still really good friends with, and she still works for the government. She works for the Department of Defense, and she got deployment orders out of nowhere, as deployment orders are. I was former military, I understand how sometimes deployments happen. And it was one of those things where she was planning on me doing something for her in a few months, but she's not going to be here in a few months, and it has to happen within the next few months. So I had to drop everything, buy plane tickets, and fly back to the United States to, take care of a few things and fly back. So everything that I had, kind of planned on that weekly plan, didn't happen. There was nothing that, I sat down on Sunday and planned out for my week that ended up happening, because on Monday I got a phone call saying, hey, I need you to spend the next 6 days in airports trying to get connecting flights to go back and forth. And then when you're here, I need you to spend, 2 days busting your ass doing this work that I need you for. And that's what ended up happening. So, you get home, you're talking on Sunday, and you're like, what happened? The world happened, life happened. There were these things that, needed to happen in a very short amount of time that I was not anticipating. And sometimes, that can happen. If you're planning on having the biggest sales week of your life and you've got all these client meetings, scheduled out, or you've got this perfect date, and then all of a sudden like a hurricane hits your area, like, and you have to, fly to live with a friend for a week or something. I mean, like that's life. Like there are acts of God, there are problems that just you cannot foresee. And it goes back to a plan, to an old joke that if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. I still think that does not negate the need for having a plan. Like, sure, you are never going to be able to come up with every potential contingency to ever happen. And I think it was Mike Tyson who said, everybody's got a game plan until the first punch is thrown. Then it kind of all goes out the window, or, everybody's got a game, everybody's got a plan until first contact or something along those lines. Like, that's a real thing. Like, there are things in life that happen that you can't anticipate. But that doesn't mean, I think one of the big problems that people have about anticipating things and acts of God's kind of things coming is that they try and incorporate that into their planning. Like, hey, I'm going to make a lot of videos next week, but I need to make a plan for if I'm struck by lightning. I just need to have that in the backup. I need to know right now, going in, what kind of, who's the doctor going to be, and how long is the normal person laid up in the hospital, and how am I going to deal with all these things? Like, I think you can generally have plans of like, hey, if there is some sort of medical issue, or if I get hurt or hit by a bus, the proverbial hit by a bus, then I need to make sure that there is enough money set aside for the kids, or that I've got an insurance policy, or whatever the case may be. But you can't anticipate everything, and some weeks don't go the way that you want them, but typically speaking, being able to have control over your life is what's going to enable you to be able to make the decisions that you want, to be able to have control, to go in the directions that you want in life. And, typically speaking, the more that you rely on other people, to give you what you want, to know what you want, like, if one of the things I always tell people, outside of this, is when I work with clients who are thinking, because I do typically a lot of marketing for businesses, so a lot of people are like, I would love to do that, I've had this business I've always wanted to do, I've always had this idea, and I'm like, you should do it. And even if you don't make, like, let's say you're making $50,000 a year right now, and you're not going to make $50,000 a year for another 3 years, you should still do it, because you can have, your own boss, you can do things the way that you want them to be done, you're going to have more autonomy in your life. And here's the thing, at year 405, you're going to make, like, if it takes you 3 years to get to 50, but at year 4 you make 75 and whatever, like, long term you're going to have made more money, and being able to control things yourself. Yeah, there are risks, and yeah, there's a lot more hard work, but the more that you can control, the more things that are open to you that you want to do, and having a plan and having goals as a family. And that's one of the reasons why having similar goals with a partner is so important. So we go over that. We try to anticipate what's coming up. So, like, things that are not, like, typically, 80% of a week is the same week after week. So, like, I try to put out a video every day. So, like, what it takes to create a video is going to be the same thing. I have to get dressed and sit down and get all the lighting set up and talk to you guys and come up with a script and everything else. Those are all things that need to happen for me to put a video out, and I know that. But sometimes there are things that come up, like, hey, this week we got to pay rent, so let's got to make sure that gets done. Or there's a PTA meeting and we both have to be at the school at 3 o'clock, so whatever you were going to do, you might need to readjust your schedule a little bit so that you're available at 3 o'clock so you can do the thing. One of the biggest things that's time consuming that I feel like most families and most people don't do, and this isn't relationship centric, is meals and meal prep. Because I think that a lot of times for myself, there's so much money that gets wasted on food that you don't eat. Like, you buy food thinking like, I'm going to, there's this thing that requires this ingredient. And I buy this ingredient, and there's a pound of that ingredient, and I use like 2 tablespoons, and the ingredient is only good for that one recipe. So here's a pound of thing, like, if you use 2 tablespoons of a pound of whatever, you still have a pound. and it's just going to sit there in my cupboard, and then in 3 years, I'm going to look at it and it's going to have gotten gross and stale and moldy and there's bugs in it, and you're like, oh, now I throw that away. But for that 3 years, it's taking up space in your life and you have to hold it and give room to it. So, coming up with a good meal plan, coming up with, a menu that uses similar ingredients so that you're not throwing things away and actually only getting things for the things that you're going to make, and trying to realize, hey, there's a little bit of leftover this and its shelf life is this, we need to get rid of it, so it's good for these recipes, let's do that this week, whatever the case may be. But like having a meal plan, so important, having a chore list, because there's definitely chores that need to get done, and trying to plan for them. And then just trying to come up with all the other parts, like, working for myself, there's a lot of factors like, hey, I need to spend 2 hours this week talking to potential sponsors to get affiliates. There are things that I need to do. So like just coming up with, these are the, because things take time. Like anything that you're going to do, you're going to be trading time for. Like that is the biggest commodity that we have. So like, looking at a schedule, trying to figure out like, who's going to be taking care of the kids? Are the children being cared for enough? It's like, are we giving them enough attention? Do we have enough time for ourselves? Making sure that we have a date night, making sure that there are, that all of the things that are needed are being addressed throughout the week, and that not only are our responsibilities being done, but our responsibilities to each other. Like you need to be able to have fun and, have a physical, love life and a sex life and all of those things. The next thing that we talk about is just our goals. Like typically speaking, we have life goals that we have set down for each other. We also come up with yearly goals. And then within the yearly goals that we set, we try and break down like how do we get to, whatever the goal is. So like one of the, goals that I have for this year is to lose weight. So like I have a goal weight that I want to hit by December. So I think back and I think, oh, what are the things that I need to do to get there? So, food is a huge one, but also exercise, all the little things that you do to get there. So it's like, well, if I can lose 5 pounds a month over, the next year, that's what I need to do in order to hit my end of the year goal. Like you're not going to lose, all of the weight in the last day of the year. Like I'm not going to like sit and do nothing. And then December 31st, I'm just going to run until all of the weight evaporates. Like that's not how that works. So, there are things that you have to do along the way. So like I try and break that down into what goal do I need to hit this month to be in line to hit my goal at the end of the year? And then what are the things that I need to do to accomplish that goal? And sometimes some of the things that you try don't work. You're like, hey, I'm going to cut out soda and I'm going to run every day. And I'm going to lose 3 pounds this month. And then you cut out soda and you run every day and you don't lose 3 pounds. You lose 2 pounds and you're like, is it okay that I lost that 2 pounds? Or, and like it's fine. Like instead of maybe my goal for the year was unrealistic. And if I can, instead of 3 pounds a month, I lose 2 pounds a month. Well, is that good enough? Or is it a case of, I need to cut out a lot more than soda, and I need to do running and lift weights and do aerobics. Like and here's the thing, like you also then need to look at, well, if I do need to, lift weights and do aerobics, where that's more time. So if I'm going to invest more time into, lifting weights and the aerobics, then what am I cutting out to make room for that? Am I cutting my sleep out? Am I cutting my family time out? And is the family time more important than what I'm doing? Like, is my health more important than this? Well, typically speaking, what most people need to be cutting out is their relaxation, their fun time. Like, typically speaking, the reason why we don't get around to the things that we actually need to be doing to be healthier and to be, more mentally stable is they're like, well, I need to watch my television. I needed to watch my shows, my stories. I need to watch my stories. That, I like to play video games for 2 hours a day. Well, when you have that block set aside for doing something that's kind of frivolous, I'm not saying that you don't need to have relaxation in your life, but if you're relaxing to the point where you need 2 hours of relaxation a day. What you need to realize internally is the reason why you need to relax for 2 hours a day is because every other aspect of your life is horrible. And the only way that you're going to change the parts of your life that are horrible is to not relax 2 hours a day, which a lot of people have, a problem with. It's like sometimes you just have to suck it up and be miserable knowing that eventually you won't be. And that what you're doing is you're just putting a Band-Aid on it and it's not actually fixing anything. And until you actually address the problems, you're going to keep having the problems that you're having, and eventually television won't fix it. If anything, television is going to make you less happy because it's not teaching you any of the lessons that you need to fix it. It's actually just giving you this false sense of reality that's bringing you further and further away from the things that you need to be doing to fix that. So I'm not, trying to bash television. I think there's a lot of good films and books that people should be reading out there, but I think that that's something you should do to augment your life and your goals and your achieving and making sure that that's happening. The next thing that I have is just business. Not only is there the things that I do every day, but if I had a wedding. So, anything, because I'm a business and because there are customers to my business, and because I have several different businesses with different kinds of customers, so with social media, I need to be able to spend time to respond to comments. So not only do I need to make the video, edit the video, upload the video, but I then need to be able to respond to people, read comments, so that I can take that feedback so that my next video can be a little bit better. You drone too much, whatever the case. So we need you to fix that and make this shorter and more concise. Okay, Roger, got it. I'm going to try and do that in the next one. But I also might have a wedding or a photo shoot. And typically with photo shoots or weddings or whatever, the customer gets to decide. So, if on Saturday I have, something where it's I would love to do something with the kids, but, we can't. Typically Saturdays are family oriented, but if there is a wedding scheduled or if clients want me to work on a Saturday and that's the only day that they can come by, I might even say something to the effect of a client, hey, could you do this on a Thursday? Or hey, could you, come by on a different day? And maybe that works for them, and maybe they're like, no, I work until 10 p.m. every night, and you can either have me come at 10 o'clock when I'm exhausted, or I can come on Saturday on my day off, and we can do it then. It's okay, well, because you're going to be fresher, and, it'll be better, let's do it on Saturday, or whatever the case. But, you have to kind of look at what clients are going to be, and again, I've had people, weddings. The reason I bring up weddings is because if you've never been a photographer, they are awful, and they're just so much work. You're there between 4 to 8 hours shooting. You get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos that you have a very short amount of time to edit. So, I feel like you go, what most people don't realize on a photographer is you're moving the entire time of the wedding. When people are eating, you don't typically work, so you can kind of sit and drink water and try and, rest your muscles and stuff, because you're carrying this big, heavy camera around, a big lens, and you're changing everything around, you're running around, because you're always trying to anticipate where the action is going to be. So it's you basically do aerobics for 8 hours, come home late, pass out, wake up early the next day and sit in front of a computer while you're sore and miserable trying to edit, and you might do that for the week. And during wedding season, here you don't have wedding seasons because I live in the Caribbean, so there's not as much weather change. But back in the United States, typically it's more seasonal, so you have spring and fall as the big wedding season. So you might not get any weddings during the winter months because it's cold, but come April and May, you could have a wedding every weekend. So, when you've got 4 or 5 weddings on weekends back to back to back, you are miserable because you now have a week to edit all these photos and videos and get that out so that you can then start over again, do all this other work, and then, the worst feeling on earth is if you don't get all of the photos edited from the previous week, and then you do another wedding and you're oh my God, I'm just overwhelmed. And then sometimes you'll get something really weird, or you'll do, normally weddings are Fridays or Saturdays, But like, there have been times where like you'll do a wedding, Friday, Saturday, and then like a weird one on like a Wednesday, because they were able to get the venue. It was like the only day they could get the venue and they hire you. So it's like, you do 3 weddings in a week, you've edited absolutely nothing, and you are so far behind, and you don't have days to edit. And it's like, 1 week you don't have any weddings, and you're just like trying to nonstop edit and no sleep and that sort of thing. I'm sure there's people out there that can appreciate where I'm coming from who are wedding photographers. But, if sometimes you get weddings that pop up out of nowhere where like, the day before the wedding, somebody is, the wedding photographer that they had hired before you got sick, and they need, a wedding photographer last minute, so you come in on, the day before, and, you've already made plans with your family, but like, weddings are fairly high dollar things, so it's like, those things happen. So trying to sit down on a Sunday and figure out like, this is what we're doing Tuesday, this is what we're doing Wednesday, and trying and really cement those schedules, which is really the last thing, is trying to sit down and figure out, this is what I got on Monday. If Friday and Saturday are going to be really heavy, involved days, like, the idea of the wedding. But Tuesday, you can potentially have off. Like maybe I work harder Monday so that we can, have our family weekend be on a Tuesday. So, maybe that morning we take the kids out somewhere to a park or to, something fun, and we have, like we kind of have the day, and then they go to school, and then maybe we have a big dinner that night. It's just kind of designed to have time together and relax, and that's where that family time comes from. And we know that because we've looked at the schedule and we know what things are. And then the next thing is, like I said, just the monthly goals, which are very similar to the weekly goals, but these are a little bit further out. Sometimes you want to even do a month to 3 months out and just kind of really look at, this is how far I'm getting on my bigger goals for the year, and we've already surpassed this, or we're doing really well in this area. Maybe what it is I want to kind of switch focus to, the weddings, we're getting way too many of them. Why am I getting so many weddings when that's really not where the focus of my business is? But this other part that I'm wanting to do, I'm not getting viewers on my YouTube channel or whatever the case is. So how do I kind of divert focus to make sure that I'm addressing things to where I'm not only doing weddings all the time, or whatever the case is. And the other big one that comes up during the monthly ones is finances, because typically speaking, we're looking back at receipts, so typically the first Sunday of the month, we're going back and we're looking at receipts, we're looking at things that have to be paid. Sometimes things come up where like the kids have a growth spurt and you got to buy all new clothes for them, or like, uniforms for their school or whatever. And, or somebody broke something that was needed, like, somebody dropped a lens and, oh my God, we have to, save up $1,000 really quick to replace the lens, or whatever the case may be. Or, tire went flat, or, things that you don't anticipate. And you always want to have, kind of the emergency rainy day fund for, flat tires and dropped lenses, and make sure you have insurance. But like, things come up. So finances is the other big one. And, the other one is just personal stuff. Like I think the at night in bed talks are much more around like the one-on-one me and my spouse conversations of, well, what's going well for you? Are you happy? What are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's not working? And really just kind of having a moment during the day to kind of just reflect. And then if things aren't going well, knowing that we need to address that the next day. So like, if you're sitting down and you're having that conversation about how things are going emotionally and how are you feeling, and they're not happy, maybe you don't have time to address it right then and there, but it shouldn't go more than a day or two before you sit down and address whatever that issue is, and sit down. And whenever you're having those conversations about how to address real problems, always try and focus on the results and not your feelings. Because what typically ends up happening in those types of conversations is it's I feel this. I feel like I'm being ganged up on. I feel like I'm, whatever. But like a lot of times when people feel attacked or they feel persecuted or they feel unfulfilled, they don't know why. And, you really need to be able to tie that into an action, which is, one of the things that really upsets me that my spouse does all the time is she puts her hand up. And the reason she does that is because she's feeling overwhelmed by the situation and she can't take any more new input. So she has to deal with thing A before she can move on to thing B. And I'm sitting there talking to her and she's like, can't deal with that. Hold on. I need to finish doing what I'm doing and then I can address your concern for whatever new thing you're going to tell me. And to me, that's very belittling. Like, it infuriates me to no end to feel like I'm being shut up and that I don't have a voice to communicate my feelings and my thoughts on a subject. So typically if I'm talking, it's because, hey, I need you to address this thing. And if you're telling me that's not important enough to me to hear that right now, that really hurts my feelings. So, we need to be able to sit down and be like, okay, when you are feeling overwhelmed, you need to be able to communicate that in a way that doesn't trigger me it upsets me disproportionately. I completely appreciate that, me getting upset by that gesture is not how she's intending it, and she's not trying to dismiss me. It just creates that instinctive feeling. So for her, it's trying to overcome and overcompensate a gesture that's very natural to her, which is probably, valid for her to make, and be able to tell me in a way that I understand what she's saying, and for me to also appreciate why she's doing that, why she feels overwhelmed, and appreciate things from where she's coming from, and be able to be on that same page so that we can get through what we're doing and get on to some of the fun things. Because, anytime that you're dealing with a life and a relationship, there's going to be non-fun things that you have to deal with. So, but being able to address hurt feelings, being able to address insecurities, being able to address things before they become a problem. If something's bothering you, don't let it go, because I think most of the things that bother us is instinctual. And, if I'm worried that I'm not being listened to, it's probably because I'm not being listened to. And if they think they're listening to you and you don't feel like you're being listened to, what it really means is that you're not using words that the other person understands, and you're not using phrases that the other person understands. So they assume this is what they're hearing, this is how you mean what you're saying, and you don't know how to communicate it in a way where they're going to understand it. So I hope that makes sense, but I think really what it comes down to is having a set time and schedule and blueprint for those conversations with your partner, and having them regularly, and just checking in to make sure that they're doing well and that you're both living a life that you both find meaningful and enjoyable.